Welcome back to the podcast, you beautiful souls. We have a beautiful guest with me today. We have a woman who's a powerhouse, but she also knows how to have a bit of balance in her life, which we're going to be learning into today or leaning into today. We have Emily Todd joining me today. Now, listen to this introduction. It's quite impressive. Emily is an ICF certified personal freedom and business coach, speaker, corporate wellness facilitator, and the founder of the burnout prevention and recovery program, Burnout Academy. We're going to be going into that today. She supports women to break free from the 9-to-5 hamster wheel, liberate themselves from the shackles of hustling, proving, pleasing, and perfecting, and build a life and business guided by pleasure, aliveness, and fulfillment. It just sounds so delicious the way you say that. Prior to launching her coaching practice, she spent 15 years clawing her way up the corporate ladder, leading large teams of high growth tech and marketing startups. After reaching the proverbial top of the mountain, a director of growth, managing a team of 20, she decided the view up there wasn't all it cracked up to be. Shortly resigned after, she since devoted herself to living a life in alignment with her desires versus a life of that's expected of her and supporting others to do the same. And that's just the start of this, ladies and gentlemen. There's a lot of value to be coming your way today with this guest. Emily, thank you for being here today.
I am so excited to be here, Lewis. Thank you for having me.
Let's dive into it. There's a fair few I guess veins of gold that you've got. Let's go through your story though first. Let's just go through who is Emily? How did you get to where you are? And yeah, what's shaped you into the woman that you are today?
Sure. So me now at this moment in time, as you said, I'm a coach. I'm currently a digital nomad in Mexico City. And this looks very different than my life 4 or 5 years ago. As you said, I started my career clawing my way up that mountain, that ladder. I was very hell-bent on making sure I reached the top of the mountain. I was the firstborn of 4, hyper achiever, wanted to make my dad very, very proud, and did whatever it took to make sure I was promoted, to make sure I got that salary bump, to make sure my dad was proud of me, right? And every promotion I got, every salary bump I got, I would call my dad and be like, Dad, I got this and this. And he would go, that's great, Emily, that's great. It didn't quite elicit the reaction I thought it would. And so about 15 years of climbing the ladder, I got to the proverbial top of the mountain, was managing a large team at a tech startup, and came to this kind of moment where it's like, which road do I want to take? There had been some things unfolding within this startup where I felt like I was starting to compromise my values, and I felt like I was starting to be asked to do things that I didn't want to do. And I had been numbing this little voice in the back of my head for many years going, is this all there is? Is this all there is? Because again, I would get that high of the promotion or the salary bump, and it would feel great for a few days, a few weeks max. Then I was racing off to the next promotion. And I was a big fan of feeling alive, not through my work, but through, okay, let's go out on Friday. Let's go on this fancy vacation. Let's go shopping. All this money you're making, all this success, like, where's the aliveness? Because I wasn't feeling alive. So I was, in retrospect, also numbing out to that knowing that there was something else for me. And when I reached that choice point, I was like, okay, I think this is the moment. I think I need to walk away from this career. And little did I know, and I resigned and made that choice. This was a few weeks before COVID hit. And, I was so excited. I was like, wow, I'm going to be, entrepreneur. I'm going to fly to Asia and I'm going to work from the beaches. It's going to be so amazing. And then 2 weeks later, quarantine hit. And I was quarantined in my parents' basement, and not base, but yeah, it was a nice one. It was nice, but it was not as glamorous as I thought. And so through that experience has been, it's been 3.5 years now, just a lot of dark nights of the soul and existential crises. And who am I? And what do I want? And why am I here? Because when I initially left my 9-to-5, I was consulting and doing basically the same thing I'd been doing in the 9-to-5, but on my own terms. And that was really fun and sexy at first. But then I was like, you know what? This is the same stuff and I don't care. And I had always loved humans, always loved people. And I had been managing a large team at the last company I was at. And I found that that's what I love doing. Like my weekly one-on-ones with my team, I had 20 weekly one-on-ones, and most directors were like, that sounds awful. Why do you want to talk to 20 people a week about their problems? And I was like, I love it. I love hearing about what's blocking them and what their personal goals are and their professional goals and figuring out how to get them there. And so I connected the dots, probably 6 months into consulting, and figured out coaching was an actual thing and went and got certified. And actually, one more thing I will say before I stop rambling. This is a true story, but in quarantine, when I was starting to be like, I don't know about this consulting thing, I was at my parents' house and found this old journal from when I was, I think, 20 or 21, like a baby. And I had written a bucket list in there. And one of the things I'd written was, I want to be a coach. And I didn't even know what a coach was. I was 21 and coaching wasn't what it is today. And I think I had seen Gabby Bernstein or one of those like earlier pioneers. And then like, wherever that is, that feels amazing. And so when I saw that, I was like, okay, 21-year-old Emily really desired this. Okay, let's see what's here. And the rest is history. Here we are.
Very, very powerful, Em. There's a lot of stuff in there that I'd love to go into. Like I was saying before we click record, there's a lot of similarities with what you do and how you help people. And I love just seeing people that are chasing their dreams, that are following their intuition. I like the part that you were numbing that voice. So we might go into that soon. I would like to we'll start big picture and then we'll jump down some rabbit holes with you. I would like to know, I guess with the work I do, it's a combination of both. It's the personal and the professional, and they're both linked. If you're struggling personally, it's going to affect you professionally. If you're struggling professionally, it's going to come into your personal life. I'd like to know from you, with the nature of the work that you do, what's kind of the ratio of what you do? Is it like 50-50? Is it 80-20? I know that 80-20 rule gets thrown around a lot, but what's kind of maybe the bigger challenges or blockages, you used that words before as well, that you find with the people you work with? And just to clarify that as well, you generally work with business owners or people that want to run business or leaders? Like who do you work with? And then what are their biggest problems is the question.
Sure. So it's kind of two buckets. I generally work with people who are, I mean, essentially me 3.5 years ago in the 9 to 5, have had a lot of success and are missing that feeling of, wow, like this is amazing. And they have all the things, the boxes have all been checked and they're still not fulfilled. So I tend to work with that archetype of human that quote unquote has it all and is like, what is next for me? And really uncovering what that is. What is the dream that you have forgotten? Because I think so many of us numb that dream out because we're like, no, we got to follow the path that's laid out before us. That doesn't really make sense. I don't know how I would do it. That's a little silly. What will people think? What will my parents think? All the things. So I work with that. And often that leads to some sort of launching of a business or sharing your gifts with the world. Often working with 9 to 5ers, there is a huge amount of burnout that needs to be addressed before we can make any move towards their dreams or taking action. Because as you know, when someone's burnt out, the lens is very narrow, right? They can't see the options. They're very low energy, cynical, hopeless. So a lot of my work is around getting people out of burnout so they have that energy and creativity available to go after what it is they want. And then I also work with early stage entrepreneurs who are having success, but are like, okay, there's something, like you said, there is often not a business problem. It's a personal problem that bleeds into the business. So it's identifying what that is and working our way through it. And it's so unique for every single human. And I know a lot of the work you do around burnout, and I do as well, it also applies to building a business as an early stage entrepreneur in particular, like learning how to set boundaries, learning how to have those courageous conversations, learning how to overcome. I mean, I work with a lot of females and overcoming that perfectionism or that people pleasing, or I don't want to ask for the client. I don't want to ask for that overdue payment. I don't want to be seen. You know, a lot of being a business owner now, an entrepreneur, is being seen, right? Using your voice, speaking, being on camera. And so I work with a lot of entrepreneurs on that. And for me, that was a huge blocker getting started in my business. I was petrified of getting on camera, petrified of public speaking. when I was in my 9 to 5 days and I had to do, the more I was promoted, the more presentations I had to do. And I would just like be up the night before, just freaking out about having to present. Like no sleep was happening that night. And then even thinking back when I was a kid in school, just so shy, so terrified. If there was a day, towards the end of the semester when you had to present, I was making sure I was sick that day. I was making sure I was not going to be in school. I think I had written this to you one time. I ended up in the ER because I faked a sickness so badly. My mom was like, there's something very wrong. We have to bring her to the hospital. I told her the truth a few years ago, and she was like, I didn't realize you were so scared of public speaking. So that's a very long answer to your question.
Yeah, no, beautiful answer. You're a great communicator, and I find generally the people that over communicate are the great communicators. They communicate really well. So yeah, sometimes one question is a 10-minute answer, and that's cool. So
thank you. Was I at 10 minutes?
No, that wasn't 10 minutes. That was just a couple of minutes. But look, obviously you mentioned the word a couple of times. Let's just go straight into it. Like burnout itself. What is burnout? What causes it? And what can someone do to prevent it or improve it?
Sure. So I like to look at it as there's two, because burnout is this kind of buzzword right now that everyone's using. And I like to view it as there's two different kinds of burnout. There's like the actual World Health Organization diagnosable clinical burnout, right? Where it's full physical exhaustion and just like there's physical symptoms, like you're not sleeping, you're having kind of these phantom health problems come up, like migraines or hair loss. You become extremely cynical, you lose your creativity, you can feel very helpless, right? And like this way of operating is the only option and there's no way out. So there's a huge amount of helplessness, cynicism, there's no light at the end of the tunnel. Oftentimes your performance at work or in your company, if you're an entrepreneur, will start to suffer. You're not able to access creative solutions. You become kind of a buzzkill to be around because you're pretty irritable. Not that I've ever experienced that. And then I think the second bucket is what I think a lot of people are experiencing, which is I like to call soul burnout, which is more a misalignment with your greater why, with your values, with your vision. What even is my vision? What even are my values, right? Yeah. And so I noticed this because I was having a lot of humans come to me. I'm so burnt out. I'm so burnt out. And we would look at their week and they were working 8 hours a day. They were off on weekends. They were taking all their vacations. So it wasn't necessarily, they weren't answering the emails on the weekends. They were doing all the right things. But yeah, they were saying they were really burnt out and they were so low energy and that low level, like, ugh. And to me, that is really a manifestation of not living in alignment with your dreams and your vision. And I think what so many of us experience, like when people ask, like, if you can wave a magic wand, what would you change? So many of us, we have had that beaten out of us. We don't know anymore because we're just busy following the roadmap laid out in front of us. So this is what it takes to be successful. This is what happiness means. And then you check the boxes and you get the thing and you're like, this is anticlimactic. Yeah. So that is what I would say around burnout and those two buckets. Have you seen something similar in your work?
Very similar. The first 3 modules I do, or I guess, well, modules if they do the course, so they work with me, I obviously do it with them personally, but values is first, purpose, mission, vision is second, and then mastering perceptions, which is how to process and let go and heal and etc. So yeah, very, very similar. They're not energetically in alignment with it, and the burnout or the soul burnout, what you're referring to, is the feedback to tell them they're not living in alignment. Low self-worth is feedback that you're not in alignment with your purpose and your values. So that's kind of my way of articulating it. But no, I like the 2 types, and I really love that. So say someone is there right now, what would you tell them? So someone's either in the first or second bucket, what would you tell them?
So if it was, I would say it's time to start really asking yourself some hard questions of what is it that you truly desire to experience in your one and precious life. And we already know, Lewis, we already know the answer's gonna be, I don't know what I want. And I always call bullshit on that because I believe we all have a kernel, a sliver, an inkling of idea what it is that we desire, but we shut it down because we're like, well, it's not possible. I don't know how.
I
What
always
if I
use, sorry to cut in, I always say, people, when they say, I don't know, it means you haven't thought about it or you're too scared to think about it.
so true. It's fear. It's the mind saying, no, 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 this is too just no. This is it is not does not fit into this timeline to the roadmap. Because when you're in the 9 to 5, it's very clear for the most part what you have to do to get promoted. And so and to get to that next level. So I think lingering and yeah, I don't know, and I need to have it all figured out. I need the roadmap, or I hear a lot like, well, what if I mess it up? So I think and I always say it's actually impossible, right? You know this entrepreneur life. It's like the more we mess it up and fail, and the more we learn and tweak and test and polish and iterate. And so I think that is the first step, is really getting clear, like what it is. And I always encourage people too, when they come at me with the, I don't know. Okay. I'm like, well, what do you know? And what experiments can we start running? Like, what can we write down? What do we know? And how can we design time and experiences for you? And what actions and choices do you have to go out and see, do I like this? Am I good at this? How does this feel in my body? Does this light me up? And it's like this research mission. It's a science experiment. Like, let's go and piece it together. And I think something that messes us up, and it messed me up, was, we see all these stories of people that wake up and they have the light bulb moment and they just knew. And that's beautiful. And it does happen for the certain people that are profiled in Forbes, and it's amazing. But I think for so many of us, it's really messy figuring it out. And it's a lot of just messy, imperfect action, and not really knowing that next step until you take that step. And then from that step, you're like, okay, well, maybe I go here. And then if you are, I would say in the first bucket of, I'm just like clinically burnt out. Yeah. I mean, this is where we're really going to go into the pillars, right? Because there's so much there. Because I think one of the problems with the way we treat actual burnout right now is with a lot of band-aids. At least that was my experience when I cycled through burnout every few months, every few years. In my tech days, it was just the norm. It was actually kind of a badge of honor. It was like, yeah, I'm really burnt out. I'm so overworked. Yeah, I'm at that till 1 a.m. It's this thing. And so it's really, instead of doing what HR and Google, when you do a Google search, how to overcome burnout, it's the same stuff. It's just, don't answer your email after 5 p.m. Don't work weekends, schedule more me time, take more vacation. Have you tried meditating, more yoga? And we all try these things. It's like the solutions are so accessible, but we still have this crazy global level, record high of burnout. So it's to sustainably get out of burnout. It's not like a one sentence response, right? As you know, it's like, let's really get to the root of what's happening here and take like a multi-pronged approach to getting at the roots. So we rip the roots out versus slap another band-aid on it.
What are some of those roots that you've found? Not obviously, there could be obviously thousands of specific ones, but what are like some of the common roots that you're finding in people that are burning themselves out?
Sure. So I think a big one, and I know we talked about this, is boundaries and our inability or unwillingness or fear to say no. I think a huge one is also these kind of, I like to call them mindset saboteurs, or these archetypes within ourselves that we replicate in all areas of our life, but at work, they really can drive you into burnout, right? So the hyperachiever, my favorite, really big ingredient for burnout. The perfectionist, right? That was me too, rereading the email 50 times before I sent it to my team. So everything is taking longer. The people pleaser, right? The controller, the one that I had some controlling tendencies too. I was like, I need to be at every meeting, every email. So these patterns those really drive burnout, right? And I think something else, and it was a big one for me, is just looking how you're managing stress, right? Because life is hard, no matter who you are or what industry you're in, it's rough. And my way of dealing with stress, and I alluded to this earlier, was let's go get a drink, let's go have a martini, let's shop, or let's and not actually releasing that stress and tension from the body. And showing up on Monday morning, like I was in the hole even more than when I left the office on Friday, because I was exhausted from the weekend. And, you know, I was in New York City, which is very much work hard, play hard. And it was like, let's go, it's Friday. And just, I see that a lot. Yeah, those are a few. And absolutely, we talked about this a bit, but really looking at how you're spending your free time. A lot of, you know, we get up in the morning or it's nighttime, or we're just like on our screens, scrolling, getting these low grade dopamine hits that last for a few seconds. Then we plunge back down. We're like, where's more? And so it's really like, okay, what do you have in your life that really sustains you and lights you up and infuses you with energy? And that is, I think, increasingly uncommon for so many to have, because it's just you get out of work and you're like, how can I numb out to the reality of what's happening? Let me get on Instagram. Let me get, you know, what's happening on Netflix. Yeah.
Beautiful answers. Maybe a similar question. Well, not really, but business coaching, or dealing with business owners. I think you kind of mentioned it in your story, just the reality of being a business owner. Like a lot of like the entrepreneur world, you see all these fucking 15-year-olds making millions of dollars. They got all these jets, they got these nice cars, sex, sunshine, rainbows, and it's like for me anyways, like that wasn't the reality. Maybe I'm just the only one, but I know that's not. Obviously, I work
You're
with
not
people.
alone, Louis.
So I'd like to know, I guess, your maybe a reality check to give people that are maybe going to go down that business route, or maybe that are in there and they're like, they feel like, oh my God, like am I alone? Am I the only one that feels like an imposter, or feels like I don't know what the fuck I'm doing? This is where's all this freedom I thought I was going to get? So yeah, I'd like to know, I guess, your reality check that you would send to people that are either in the business trenches or are wanting to get into the trenches.
Sure. Oh, I love this one so much. So to me, and I'm sure you share this sentiment, but like to start a business or to become an entrepreneur is going against all of your hardwiring as a human. It's going against that reptilian, primordial survival brain that craves the comfort, the safety, and the predictability. And so when you enter something that is so unpredictable and unstable, entrepreneurship, launching a business, it brings up all of your stuff, like all of your shadows, all of your doubts, your triggers, your wounds, your greatest insecurities, the dark night of the soul, the existential crisis on the regular, on the first of every month. It's like, here it is again. It is so inherently, I think, against what we're built to crave, right? That comfort and safety. And it's so confronting. And I know we talked about this earlier, but there is this portrayal of it being so glamorous. And so I think that really messes some of us up when we come in with the idea it's going to be all time freedom and whoa, 6-figure months, and the client's just manifesting while you're sleeping, and it's just so amazing. And then when reality hits, it's like, what am I doing wrong? I mean, everyone else is I'm looking at Instagram and everyone is just having the easiest time. And so I think that fallacy, that fantasy that is sold is not preparing us for the reality of it, which is that it's really, really hard. And something that really came up for me heavily was, because all of my comfort and safety was removed, and my identity, like I had this identity that I was very married to for many years, of like, I am Emily and I manage this team and I have this job title and I live in New York City and I'm so cool, and like just really feeling myself, nothing wrong with that. But then when that was all removed and I was like building from ground zero, it was this massive identity crisis.
Yeah.
Of who am I, who am I, like what can I hang my hat on here? Because all the things I used to hang my hat on, I don't have anymore. And so I think there's this identity crisis, existential crisis that happens when you're in between who you were and who you are becoming. Because it's like when the business hasn't fully landed yet, and there's that really messy in between. That is that is shadow work like no other. Like you've seen the Instagram meme, right? You know, starting a business is just an invitation to do some really intense shadow work.
Yeah. We'll get into shadow work. That's one of the next topics. While we're on this one, what are your top 3 tips for people either in the business world or getting into it, just to help them, I guess, readjust to the reality of it, or maybe handle it a little bit better, start to keep growing and elevating and leveling up? What would be your top 3 tips?
That's such a good question. I think for me, the number one, and I'm sure for you as well, has been to receive mentorship and coaching from someone who has been there. And I made the mistake of not doing that initially because I was like, I can figure it out, you know, whatever. And it is so lonely to begin with, being an entrepreneur, especially at the beginning, or a solopreneur, whatever it is. But really, like, proximity is power, and put yourself in a room or in a group with someone or a group of humans who have been or are where you are desiring to go, because your friends, your old life, they're not really going to get what you're going through. They're going to not, I mean, they're going to try, they're going to be loving and supportive, but they're not going to get it. And for me, working with a coach that really, like, she pulled herself up and did it like on her own, one foot in front of the other, and being able to work with her and learn from her has been soul medicine like no other. And I think my other big one has been really setting yourself up to win, to stack small wins, to stack and to build that confidence. Because something I did early on that messed me up was I was like, out of the gate, I have this goal, I'm going to manifest this. And, you know, it was a little too far from my homeostasis, from where I was. So I set myself up to continuously feel like I was failing versus looking for the evidence where I was already winning and creating the conditions for me to win. Small micro wins to really build that self-trust, to build the confidence. Like, instead of I'm gonna have $100,000 month, it's like, can I have $100 week? Yeah. Can I, you know, make that courageous ask? Can I challenge myself to do this thing? Can I do an Instagram live to build my confidence? Can I start posting? Like, to just set these small targets that you know you can hit versus these big. I mean, this is what happens in January too, right? Where we mess up as humans in general. We're like, January, changing my whole life. And then February rolls around, we're like, Yeah. And so I really love to encourage my clients, and I'm really in that practice with myself as well, of how can I set myself up to stack small wins and build confidence? Because you don't actually, your conscious mind doesn't have the evidence at first of the big months or the big testimonials or the big client. And so it's like, how can I create those conditions? Because confidence, right? They always say you need confidence to be successful, and that's great. But I was like, where do I find where is it? I'm not finding it anywhere. So it's, I think, confidence that you need to really succeed as an entrepreneur is found in stacking these small wins. Yeah, those would be my 2 big ones.
I said 3. I want one more.
Oh, 3. Okay. Okay. I know what I'm going to say. So, when I first started with entrepreneurship, I was very much like, okay, no more burnout for me. I was burnt out for years. And I think within a few months, I was right back where I had started, super burnt out, super angry, cynical, resentful. My creative juice was gone. So I think really setting a structure and a schedule for yourself to be offline, to be out of your business, to be busy living and soaking up inspiration, ideas, energy, aliveness, because, right, you are the business. And if you're not feeling so good, like, it's all going to start crumbling down. So it's really, how can you be so intentional about honoring your desires, like what feels playful, what feels pleasurable, what makes you feel that sense of aliveness, and treat that like it's your job, because it is, right? Tending to your energy is your job as an entrepreneur. So that would absolutely be my 3rd one.
Beautiful answer. Look, we'll come back to the shadow work, but you inspired a question that I've written down. This is my views, and I'd like your take on it. So it's the balance between the hustle and the grind versus what you pretty much just said, doing things out of inspiration. And I think my journey, when I started my entrepreneurial journey, I was very unconscious. uninformed optimist. I'm gonna make $1 million. I'm gonna do all this shit and make it all happen. Anyways, and like I was good at the achieving. I was good at I had 3 physical studios at 23 years old. I had 15 team members. We're doing 7 figures a year, and I was like, but I was, it was it was a thirst that was never quenched. It was just always more and more and next and next and next. And obviously, since doing a lot more shadow work, inner work, working on me and healing those insecurities, which I still have plenty that I'm working through, it's learning to actually have goals that you are inspired to, but you're not attached to. And that was something that was really challenging for me. It was very much like I wanted to open 50 studios. Why the fuck would I want to do that? Like that, like now anyway, I'm like, fuck that. No way. And even like with what I'm coaching, like I had my biggest month last month, and it's like, that's great. But it's like, there's sometimes I'm like, not good enough. What's next? What's next? Versus like, you know what? I'm totally cool switching off. I don't, it's not just about a bigger number, a bigger month, more money, more whatever, more cars. And this comes a lot from Wayne Dyer, if you've gone down his rabbit hole, and he's a lot about detachment and not getting caught up with accumulation of things, of money, of cars, of status, and all that stuff, because that's just all ego goals, essentially. So I'd like to know your thoughts on what you would say, or your advice to people who are maybe in that, like, achieve, accumulate. I have to have more money, more status, more goals, more cars, more success, versus like, okay, well, I'm actually inspired to do this because it's inspiring to me, but I'm not actually attached to having it at the same time. That for me was it was a painful journey to get to that point, but I'd like to know your thoughts on that and what advice you'd have.
Sure. So you mean speaking to me again 3.5 years ago? Because it sounds like you were as well. I was so on that hamster wheel of more. And I actually believe there's no way out of that until you've reached a point often where you're like, okay, I got that thing. But then radically reflecting, how do I actually feel now? And what's actually unfolding in my life? Let's be really honest here. Did I feel the way I thought I was going to feel? Okay, well, maybe yeah, for a few days, a few weeks, or a few months. But I think after a while, you have that awakening on your own. And I don't think any amount of someone giving you advice or telling you, it's just your ego chasing things, can like take that from you, because we are human beings. We have this social world we live in where there are these markers of success. So I do think it is really helpful if you get a taste of it at least, and you have that realization, okay, it's not quite what I'm here for. But for me, it's because they always say, right? And we know this to be true. The only reason we desire the thing is because of how we think it will make us feel. And we get the thing, we feel that way temporarily. But for me, and this is all about defining what success means for you, it's really like understanding, how do you desire to feel in your life? Like, what are your key pillars for how you want to feel? And for me right now, like, I want to feel aliveness, I want to feel pleasure, and I want to feel peaceful. And certain things I'm desiring and goals I'm setting in my business are absolutely in alignment with that. But it's also understanding that feeling, I can take actions throughout the day, throughout the month, throughout the year, to create those feelings on my own, and to already feel so successful, and like to already feel how I think that milestone in my business will make me feel. And I mean, it's not for everyone, right? They're like, I always say this, like, there's nothing. I used to really look down on the ego desire of more and more and more. And, that's the path for some. Like, it's not everyone's cup of tea to do this journey that you and I are both on, and do this shadow work. You get so messy and just like naked of like, who am I? What do I really want? And I actually don't think it's any more noble. Sometimes I used to be really snooty and be like, oh, you're chasing cars. But now I'm like, you know what? Like, that, maybe that's your path. And as I said earlier, like, when we awaken, when we're meant to, and you can't rush someone. And if you're meant to, like, maybe that's not your path. Like, there's nothing to me wrong with, like, for example, my dad, super traditional, like, just worked his whole life, accrued all of that, the boxes. But his number one value in life was family. Like, he came from a big Mormon family, and he was taught, family, your children, provide. And no one can take that from him. Like, to him, checking the boxes and hitting the goals is nothing could be happier for him because of what it's allowed him to do for his family. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. You mentioned the word awakening moment. What was yours? Or what? I know we have
Mm.
many of those moments. What was one of the biggest ones that come to mind?
Oh, I mean, I think what I had talked about earlier, that moment when I really got all the things I wanted in the 9 to 5 world. I had the salary, I had the job title, I had the team. And you know what? I had called my dad when I got that director promotion and I was managing 20 people. And I was like, Dad! And it was the same reaction. It was the same reaction. It was, that's great, honey. That's awesome. And I think in that moment, that was a wake up call for me of, I'm very, very blessed of realizing my dad actually just wants me to be happy and loves me no matter what. And oh my God, has my whole career essentially been on the foundation of trying to get that love and approval from my dad. And I think the past 2 years, I mean, he doesn't really understand what the hell I'm doing right now, but he knows I'm happy. And so he's all very supportive. But I would say that was the big moment. And I think, like I had said earlier, when I was asked to do something in my company where that really went against my values, and I had that feeling of claustrophobia and having no choice and no freedom, and my whole body kind of shutting down for a few months when I was in the position of having to execute this thing. And I was just like, I completely just full body shut down. And I will never again be in the position where I am made to go against my values, where I'm out of choices. I have no choice. I have no freedom. I have choose tattooed on my arm now for a reason. And that was the moment. That was, like we said, one of like 50,000 million moments of awakening, but that's the one that always stands out for me of like the turning point. And, I could have stayed. The company's apparently doing really well. And I often think, like, that movie Sliding Doors? What would life be like if I was still there? And I would probably be up to my usual shenanigans and not, quote unquote, awake. And I had always been tangentially interested in spirituality. Like, I grew up with my mom playing Eckhart Tolle CDs in the minivan on the way to soccer practice.
Very,
And I would hear about the power of the now. And we would make fun of his voice because we didn't, we were kids.
yeah.
But the seed was there. And then I remember in college, like, I took a spirituality and empowerment class. Somehow I got credit for that. It was amazing. And in that, I was, studying all these ancient texts, and I was like, whoa, this feels so good. And then I remember my first job, there was a night I was at the office till probably midnight. And I remember sitting there and crying and thinking, is this what I have to do the rest of my life? But then you shut that down. I shut that down because I was like, no, like, we can't think like that. If we're going to do this thing, if we're going to do the 9 to 5, we cannot entertain outside possibilities.
Yeah.
And so there was like that seed from, mom and the Eckhart Tolle CDs. There was that seed from that class in college, but definitely the past 2 years has been like rapid fire.
That's fucking beautiful. Luke, just with the time we've got remaining, let's get into the actual topic of shadow work. I use the term healing. I know shadow work and healing can kind of overlap. I'd like to know, I guess, your views on it. And I guess the balance of the personal life of the healing work and how that shows up in your business. I know we were speaking about this before we hit record, but yeah, I guess shadow work for you, what is it? How does one do it? And I guess how does that show up in your personal and professional life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for me, shadow work is really looking at those parts of yourself that you don't really want to admit are there, that you don't really want to see. It's looking at all the ineffective patterns and ways of showing up and ways of choosing and behaving and making choices that are, for the most part, unconscious until you make them conscious. One of my favorite quotes in the entire universe is that Carl Jung one, right? Until you make the unconscious conscious, you will call it, yeah. Well, I'm butchering it, but you know the quote I mean. So for me, it's all about making these unconscious patterns that are running our life conscious so that we can make a different choice.
How does someone do that?
There's so many ways. There's not one way. Like, my gateway drug to all of this, other than Eckhart Tolle, was I started with I started in therapy like seven years ago, because it was one of those things that was like becoming more socially acceptable, and my health insurance paid for it. So I was like, let's see what this is about. And that was a beautiful mirror for me to start seeing how the way I was operating was not actually autonomous choice. It was actually patterns I had picked up from my upbringing, from my parents, from the meanie bullies in school, like all of that. And so there's, so you can work with a coach, you can do a shadow work course, you can do a psychedelic journey, you can go, there's so much you can do. And I think it looks different for everyone, but for me, the foundation of it is really, why do I do what I do? And my mentor always says, I've never met a human who didn't make perfect sense. And there's a reason why you do everything. And so it's really getting curious about why you do what you do. And, you know, is that really the way the world is? Is that really just the way you are? Or is that something you learned? And more than likely, and as you know as well, more than likely something occurred in your childhood, in those primitive years, 0 to 7, that informed how you're showing up, what you believe to be true about yourself and the world. These patterns, I mean, that's a huge way to do shadow work. If you want to just like do it really fast in 5 minutes, grab your journal. What are the patterns, right, that you're seeing come up over and over again in your life? And where's that coming from? Why is that happening? It's not just happening, you know, randomly. You're not just waking up and like making these choices that are causing these. It's happening for a reason. It's getting really curious about that. And
what were some of the patterns or parts of you that were quite hard to heal or integrate or work through?
Yeah. Oh man, such a good question. So for me, a big one I had was a gnarly abandonment wound from childhood. I am the daughter of an alcoholic, and my mom and my dad was just not there. He was an entrepreneur. He was always working, and I always felt, I didn't know that's why I was acting like such a psychopath in relationships for many years, but that was something that was really hard for me to overcome. And it would pop up, not just in romantic relationships, it would pop up in friendships. If I felt like someone was not showing up for me as a friend, if I felt like something was happening at the office, like I would freak out. And something that would really come from that was something I worked through very heavily the past 2 years, was anger. Because there would be that feeling. I used to just be like, oh, I have an anger problem. That was one of my shadows. I get people like, you're so nice. And then, woo, there would be that flip, that switch that would flip. And I would get so angry. And through quote unquote shadow work, therapy, coaching, I understood, because I felt so abandoned, and that little girl within me was freaking out, and she was throwing a tantrum. She was so angry. And so it was starting to, instead of shame myself and beat myself up for being needy or being angry, it was understanding why that was happening and having compassion. And again, with awareness, we start to be able to make different choices. And it's not like as soon as I had that awareness and therapy, I all of a sudden like didn't get anxious and didn't get angry, but it was like that started to put other choices and other options on the table. And right, with each choice, we start to build a new neural network in our brains. And so over time, making that choice over and over again, okay, like let's not fly off the handle here. We started to break that neural network and build a new one of, okay, like that happened. That's, whoo. Yeah.
Beautiful. And I guess to wrap up that question, how does this show up in people's business, in their personal life? Just to give people maybe some, because you don't know what you don't know, right? Like some people are just unconsciously playing out patterns and they think it's normal. Like it's not the line that you were trying to paraphrase. It's a different one. It's, we question all of our beliefs except for the ones we truly believe. Those ones we never think to question. So think people just, it is who they are until someone shines the light on them and like, wow, do you realize you keep self-sabotaging? Do you realize that you're shutting down and not letting people in? And do you realize that you lose your shit when someone challenges you or whatever it may be? So how does the shadow work? And I know it's individual to the person, but what are some of the common ways lack of shadow work shows up in people's business?
Mm-hmm. Such a good question. Yeah, what are some of the common ones? I mean, you mentioned self-sabotage just now, and I think that is such a huge one. Because I think you're pushing forward, right, in your business. You're wanting to have this new level of impact or service or success, and you more often than not are potentially sabotaging yourself, and you see these options on the table as unsafe, right? We talked about earlier being seen, right? So there's an opportunity to be seen and to activate your voice and to speak about your services online, or to make the courageous ask for the client or for the podcast or for the workshop or whatever it is, to receive support. And you often like won't do it because there's this piece in you, this shadowy part, or you can often, the two are so interlinked. The inner child too just doesn't feel safe, like making that request, making that ask, being seen. So I think a lot of it is that you have infinite choices as an entrepreneur in any moment, but your feeling of this is not safe, and therefore I will not take action on it, or I'll start to experience like a taste of it. I'll start to experience these clients coming in, but then it overwhelms my nervous system. It feels unsafe. I have all these subconscious beliefs maybe about what more clients means, more money means, more visibility means, and I will shut that down without even realizing it. So I think that's a huge one that I see and that I absolutely did at the beginning.
Yeah.
Another one that I see a lot show up is this pattern of, because I work with a lot of women, is this pattern of perfectionism. And that has really deep roots, often in, again, our childhood, and what mommy and daddy said when you didn't get the A+, or what happened when you showed up at school and the kids laughed at you because you were wearing this outfit or your hair or whatever. And so a lot of entrepreneurs too, without having this awareness around this pattern, you will block yourself. You won't even do the thing. You won't even try the thing. You won't even see that the thing is an option on the table, because you're like, no, I won't be perfect at that. So we will not even acknowledge that that is on the table. We will not take action on it. We will not try. And I think, you know, as an entrepreneur, you got to get messy. You got to get comfortable being imperfect, being messy, being vulnerable, making mistakes. And so I think that's a huge thing that's going to block you in your business, this desire to be perfect. And that really blocked me for a long time. When I first started coaching, my coach at the time, she took a look at my Instagram. She's like, this is bullshit, Emily. She's like, this is all just stupid selfies and inspirational quotes. She's like, what is this garbage? And I was like, because I look good, you know, like cool. And she's like, 10 videos in 10 days. Let's go. And I was like, what? I had never filmed a video in my life. So this was what I like to call an edging process of like, let's like edge you into that thing that you believe is so unsafe. Like, let's be aware of the pattern and let's do the complete opposite and rewire and expand your somatic body to understand that. Because my subconscious belief there was being imperfect, appearing on camera, people making fun of me, my hair not being perfect, my skin being oily, my pimples on display was very unsafe. Like something really bad would happen. I didn't realize that's what I was believing, but it wasn't until like I was challenged by my coach, like this is happening, that I broke that pattern. It was a massive pattern interrupt. So I think, and I'm so rambling, I'm so sorry. So I think one of the things I would say is when you become aware of these patterns, it's like, how can you create a pattern interrupt for yourself to start the rewiring process? And how can you start to edge into doing that, the opposite of what the patterning is telling you to do, in a way that feels edgy, but still safe, because you don't want to completely blow out your nervous system and create a trauma that you're going to be like, I'm never doing that again. So that's what I would say there.
Beautiful answer. Look, we could speak for fucking hours, to be honest, because I only got about a third of my questions out. But to wrap this up, just because of time, I like to finish with a vulnerable question, and then you can obviously share where people can find you. What is something that Emily Todd is working through right now, personally, that the world doesn't get to see?
Oh, okay. Okay, Lewis. So something I'm navigating right now is a breakup. The removing of my proverbial, I've been calling it pacifier. I've been with this person for 4 years. So he was the one constant, I think, in my life as I left the 9 to 5 and that identity and am doing what I'm doing now. And so he was that safety net, that rock that my inner child was like, it's all okay here. It's the one constant. And it became very unaligned, but I would not allow myself to see that and to complete the relationship. And because it was my safety, it was my pacifier. And I recently ended that 2 months ago. Yeah. So that has brought up a lot with my little girl inside, feeling very unsafe and very like, who's going to take care of us now? And very angry of like, why did you get rid of our friend? Like we were so happy together. Why did you take him away? And so I've been in this work of cultivating safety internally on my own without having that need met externally, which when I'm reflecting on, I'm like, well, that wasn't so great to be using a relationship to feel safe. And I didn't realize I was doing that at the time. That my coach pointed that out. That's why we love our coaches. So that's what I'm growing through right now.
That's beautiful. Thank you for the vulnerability. Beautiful conversation. And honestly, there's only maybe a tip of the iceberg that we got into today, but maybe part 2. So Em, how can people find you, connect with you, say you're beautiful, you're amazing, and even work with you with services if they're inspired to? Where can they find you?
They can find me. You guys can find me on Instagram. That's where I spend the most of my time. That's where all my links are, my programs. So apply to work with me. It's Emily Oriana Todd on Instagram.
Beautiful. Emily, thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I love this, and the time flew. Wow.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.